Hey everyone, let's talk about types of foreshadowing today. So we've learned foreshadowing before, but just to recap, foreshadowing is a warning or indication of a future event in literature or film. Authors use this to kind of build suspense and tension, or to have you keep guessing what's going to happen later. Today we're going to learn 5 different types of foreshadowing. Our first type of foreshadowing is called Chekhov's gun. Chekhov's gun is probably the most popular form of foreshadowing, but it's basically when an author brings something up in a very casual, not a big deal way, and then at the end of the novel or the movie or the short story, it comes back in this huge, significant way. It's called Chekhov's gun because playwright Anton Chekhov famously said, "You say in the first chapter that there's a rifle hanging on the wall, in the second or third chapter it must absolutely go off. If it's not going to be fired, it shouldn't be hanging there." There's a really good example of Chekhov's gun in the movie Shaun of the Dead. In fact, it's so spot on that it's definitely a reference to the Chekhov quote. So what you need to know about this movie. You need to know Shaun of the Dead is a zombie movie. The first clip is before any zombies attack. The second one is during a fight with a zombie. Both of these scenes take place in a bar called the Winchester, and in the bar, there's a Winchester rifle over the bar that Shaun and Ed argue about whether or not it's loaded throughout the film. Let's watch it.
It's connected. Why do you think there's a rifle above the bar?
Because the pub's called the Winchester.
Exactly. See?
Why don't you just shoot him, man? Ed, for the last time...
So obviously we can see in the first clip at the beginning of the movie, they set up the whole idea that the gun is there and they debate whether it can be fired. Later, we see them use it to fight the zombies, and throughout the rest of the film, they use it to escape and defend themselves. So it's a really good example of bringing up foreshadowing in the beginning in a very small way and having it come back later. Prophecy foreshadowing is our next one. This one's pretty straightforward and the easiest to identify because it's usually some sort of fortune teller or omen or thing like that, where it literally tells us what's going to happen later and then it comes true. For example, in the Harry Potter series, there's 2 separate prophecies, both of which come true. There's the prophecy that Harry Potter's the only one that can defeat Voldemort, and there's the prophecy that Trelawney makes in Prisoner of Azkaban about Peter Pettigrew returning to Voldemort. Next up, we have flashback and flash forward foreshadowing. Authors use this by using a flashback or forward to give a reader information that we normally wouldn't get based on the current storyline. So this information happened in the past or the future, but we need it as a hint for what's going to happen later. This example has a huge spoiler alert, but Sixth Sense came out in 1999, so here we go. In the movie The Sixth Sense, it begins with a flashback of this guy, Dr. Malcolm Crowe, who's a psychologist, being shot by an old patient of his. The movie then jumps forward several months as though nothing has happened. Dr. Crowe gets a new patient, and this new patient can see ghosts. At the end of the movie, we find out that Dr. Crowe has been dead the entire time. He was killed in the opening scene of the movie. So the flashback actually, hinted at the ending of the movie. Symbolic foreshadowing is probably one of the most difficult types of foreshadowing to identify because you have to find a symbol in the text and then analyze what that symbol means. A really popular general type of symbolic foreshadowing usually has to do with weather, like if a storm is coming, so is change, and things like that. I've never watched Game of Thrones, but so I've heard in Game of Thrones, there's constantly this motto of winter is coming, and it's kind of this warning to remind them to be vigilant and be prepared. But winter is more than just the season; it's also symbolic of struggle, difficulty, and a threat of those White Walker guys. Last one, red herring is actually kind of the opposite of foreshadowing. It's like fake foreshadowing. Its only purpose is to distract you from the truth and to throw you off and create more suspicion and to surprise you with the ending. This is really, really, really super popular in detective fiction and crime shows. I'm not even going to use a specific example because literally every crime show ever does this in every episode. If you've watched Law & Order, NCIS, even Scooby-Doo, all of these crime shows use red herrings every single time. There's always that one person that the cops are convinced did the crime at the beginning of the show, and 100% of the time they didn't. That's a red herring. The idea is that person distracts you from who the real killer is. So now that we know all 5 types, let's take a look at this example of Chekhov's gun and red herring in a clip from the TV show Archer. In the following clips, we'll see the difference between a red herring foreshadowing and a Chekhov gun foreshadowing.
It's a lot finer than I prefer.
That's because it's a hypodermic needle.
What?
And the cartridge is full of a deadly super toxin called poisocaine. Here.
Hey, whoa!
Keep it in here.
Wait a minute.
But be careful. The cap slips off for, like, no reason. Russian-made, 25 caliber. Here, it's a gift.
Thanks. Wow, that is slippery.
And the safety's off, so be careful. It could go off for, like, no reason.
So, we've been presented with 2 instances of foreshadowing, the poison pen and the Chekhov gun. One of them is a murder weapon. If the writers of Archer had followed Chekhov's rules of foreshadowing, both the poison pen and the Chekhov gun should kill someone before the end of the episode. However, this is not the case. One of these 2 items is an example of a Chekhov's gun foreshadowing, and the other is an example of a red herring foreshadowing. Have you figured out which one's which?
It's my fat Irish. Ow! What the hell in your freaking pocket? I don't feel so good.
The murder weapon was the poison pen. So the poison pen is a perfect example of a Chekhov's gun foreshadowing. It's brought up earlier in the episode and the danger that the cap slips off for, like, no reason. The Chekhov gun is actually an example of a red herring foreshadowing. We're made to believe the Chekhov gun is actually a Chekhov's gun, but nothing ever happens with the gun. So this is also situational irony.
God, I said the cap slips off the poison pen for no reason, didn't I?
I know, but I just assumed that if anything bad happened, it
No,
would been...
do not say the Chekhov gun, Cyril.
I
That,
just-
sir, is a facile argument.
And also woefully esoteric.
Woodhouse.
The show even points out the situational irony in this final clip. Cyril points out that he thought if anything was going to happen, it would have been the Chekhov gun. Archer then says that this is a facile argument, which means it's too simplistic or lacks careful thought. And then Woodhouse adds that it's esoteric, which means only a few people would get the Chekhov gun reference. But now you're one of those few people.